program is the active center. It's created by David Sappe.
Pronounced Seppi.
Pronounced Seppi.
So let's talk about the political spectrum. We hear the terms left and right thrown around every single day. But what do they really mean? It's time to cut through all the noise. We're going to draw a clear map to help us navigate the entire political landscape together. Look, it's really easy to feel lost in this sea of labels, right? But these aren't just random words. They represent fundamentally different ideas about how society should actually work. And I promise, by the end of this, you'll see exactly how they all connect. All right, so think of it this way. We're going on a guided tour across a map of ideas. We're going to start on one end and journey all the way to the other, stopping at all the major landmarks of political thought to really understand what defines them. Okay, our journey kicks off on the left. Now, broadly speaking, this side of the map is all about themes like collective well-being, equality, and a real desire for social progress, change from the way things are now. Let's see what that actually looks like. So our very first stop, way out on the far left end of our map, is communism. And right away, you can see this isn't about small tweaks. This is a revolutionary ideology with a massive goal: to completely remake society into a classless, stateless community where the means of production, we're talking the factories, the farms, all of it, are owned by everyone. So, what does that system look like in practice? Well, politically, it means you've got a single party leading the charge to completely reject capitalism. Socially, the good of the group is placed way, way above any individual desires. And economically, the state just takes control of everything, centrally planning the entire economy and getting rid of private property altogether. You've probably heard this phrase from Karl Marx before, right? It just perfectly captures that economic ideal. The whole idea is that everyone contributes what they can, and in return, everyone gets what they need to live. It's really the core principle of this whole collective vision. Okay, now let's take just one step in from that revolutionary edge, and we find socialism. Now, it shares that communist goal of reducing inequality, but its methods are totally different. Instead of a revolution, it's all about working within democratic systems to get to social ownership of key industries. So the crucial thing to get here is the blend. Socialists push for a really strong state role in providing things like healthcare and education for everybody. And what you often see is a mixed economy, one that allows for private businesses, but with a lot of state involvement. And it's all funded by higher taxes, especially on the wealthy. All right, our last stop on the left side of the map is liberalism. This whole ideology is built on a foundation of individual rights and freedoms, all protected by a democratic government. The goal here is really to find that perfect balance between personal liberty and a society that's fair for everyone. And what's really fascinating here is how it's all about combining different ideas. Politically, it's all about protecting our civil liberties through a constitution. Economically, it totally embraces capitalism, but with a big but. It believes capitalism needs rules and regulations, plus social safety nets to make sure it functions fairly for everybody. Okay. We've made it to the middle of our map, the center. And this isn't just some halfway point. It's a really distinct political approach that kind of acts as a pivot, often borrowing ideas from both sides to find a practical way forward. If there's one word to remember for centrism, it's pragmatism. It's way less about sticking to some rigid ideology and a whole lot more about finding what actually works. The main goals are stability, balance, and creating policies that a lot of people can agree on. Centrists really champion that get things done approach. Socially, that means they value tolerance and prefer gradual, stable progress over any kind of radical shift. And economically, they usually support free markets, but with just enough government oversight to ensure things are stable and fiscally responsible. All right, let's cross that center line. We are now entering the right side of the map. And over here, the guiding principles start to shift towards things like tradition, order, individual liberty, and economic freedom. And our first stop over here is conservatism. And, well, just like the name suggests, this ideology is all about trying to conserve. It places a super high value on preserving the institutions and traditions that have shaped society over time, because it believes they provide essential stability. This philosophy really boils down to three core pillars. Politically, you've got a deep respect for law and order. Socially, there's a huge emphasis on traditional structures like family and national identity. And economically, there's a powerful belief in private enterprise. fueled by lower taxes and less regulation. So, to really get where this all comes from, you kind of have to look back to a key thinker, Edmund Burke. He famously argued that society is like a partnership between the past, the present, and the future, and he warned against the dangers of radical, revolutionary change. Now, as we keep moving further to the right, we run into libertarianism, and this takes that idea of individual liberty and pushes it to its absolute logical extreme. The core principle here is self-ownership. You own your body, you own your choices, and you own your property, and the state should have almost no say in any of it. So what does that actually look like? Well, it means a tiny government, sometimes called a night watchman state, that only exists to protect people from force and fraud. That's it. Socially, it means total freedom, as long as you're not harming others. And economically, it's pure laissez-faire capitalism, which basically means let it be, no government regulation at all. And here we are, at the far right end of our map. Representing the ultimate belief in tradition and hierarchy, we find monarchy. In this system, all the authority rests with a single person, a sovereign, whose right to rule is traditionally passed down through a family line.
Yeah, this really paints a picture of a society that's completely built on hierarchy, doesn't it? All the political power flows from the very top down. The social structure is rigid and very clearly defined, and the economy itself is managed to protect the stability and wealth of that ruling dynasty.
All right, so we've done it. We've completed our journey from one end of the map to the other. Now let's kind of zoom out and take a look at the entire political landscape we've just charted.
Just look at this comparison for a second. It's the two extremes side by side. Under communism, the state's role is total. Under libertarianism, it's basically non-existent. The source of authority shifts from the collective party on one end all the way over to the sovereign individual on the other. I mean, it's just such a dramatic illustration of how vast the differences in thinking can be.
And there you have it, our whole journey, laid out in one single table. You can really see the progression here, from the far left's goal of equality through the state, to the center's search for balance, and finally to the right's focus on order and individual autonomy. Feel free to pause here if you just want to soak it all in.
So, we've mapped out the classic spectrum, but that leaves us with one last and maybe the most important question. In our modern world, where all the issues are so complex and interconnected, how well do these neat, linear labels really capture what you, or anyone else for that matter, truly believes? That's definitely something to think about.